What's up, everyone? My name is Aly, and you're listening to the Ear Coffee Podcast. This week, I spoke with the rotating experimental noise group Nymphs about their debut long-form work, Silently, a 12-hour-long, one-take improvisation featuring 3 performers, 6 movements, and over 25 instruments. Created by Evelyn Rivers, aka Somewhere Nice Someday, the first Nymphs work also features Yvonne Bordowitz and Astrid Hubbard Flynn. We spoke about drone, anti-fascist direct action, harsh noise and collaboration, the ideal listening circumstances for a 12-hour piece of music, and more. All proceeds from Silently will be sent directly to a Palestinian family. The album is available on Bandcamp. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Evelyn, Yvonne, and Astrid of Nymphs. Before we get too much further, I would love to just do a little bit of biography, laying the groundwork for the conversation. If everyone wouldn't mind introducing themselves, maybe tell us a little bit about the other projects you're in, if any, or just kind of your own solo music. And then as a way to kind of segue from that, I'd love to hear a little bit about what drew you to noise music when you started listening to it and kind of making experimental music, and just kind of what the catch or the inciting event for your passion for abstract electronic and noise music, if that's not too broad of a way of for things to start.
Okay. My name's Evelyn Rivers. I play guitar and a bunch of other instruments. My solo music is Somewhere Nice Someday. I've been playing music for that since 2022. And what drew me to like noise and experimental music was I've always liked I guess extreme art in a way, but I never really liked how gross a lot of it is. And I wanted to make my own extreme art that wasn't gross, pretty much. And yeah.
What do you mean by gross, Evelyn?
Just distasteful things, I guess. Not really necessarily in terms of sound, but more in terms of lyrics. I feel like a lot of extreme music is not nice. If that makes any sense.
My name's Astrid Hubbard Flynn. I use they, them pronouns. I go by Asteroid on stage as a solo noise musician, and just by my full name for other projects that aren't noise exactly. I grew up playing classical piano and eventually flute, and fancied myself a composer from an early age. Did a lot of notated music earlier in my life, but for the past few years have been focusing more on other things. And yeah, so let's see, I go by Asteroid. I'm part of this group at the moment. I have some harsh ambient duos that I tend to do with Eros EV a couple times a year. And as far as what got me into extreme or experimental music, I feel like I've had like a dozen or so breakthrough points where I've found different artists. I mean, I was maybe 5 or 6 years old when I happened to, for very complicated reasons, be at an Evan Parker solo set without knowing who that was. And I was very enthused at the idea that you could just kind of make some noises and lay it out there, and that could be music. I've also been very drawn to various forms of minimalism, like music that doesn't do very much over long periods of time. Something about my brain fixes on that in a way that it doesn't with other music. So, I mean, I was very into a few particular pieces by Philip Glass at age 12, and like some other pieces by Arvo Pärt that I was really into at age 14 or 15. And yeah, could list several more things, but I feel like I've had several kind of noise breakthroughs and minimalism breakthroughs that have led me to the position where I'm interested in recording a 12-hour harsh ambient album with these two.
Yeah, so my name is Ivan Miriam Bordowitz. I release music under my name, Ivan B. And most of my music is centered around silence and like concretizing like some kind of art object out of silence, whether that be like through field recordings or text scores or various other media. I occasionally do like collaborative duos. I'm not really in any like recurring group, so to speak. Although that might be changing soon. So look out for that. And as far as what got me into experimental music, there's so like with Astrid, there's just like so many different points that I could point to that like moved me like in my experimental music journey, whether that be like my brother showing me Consume Red by Ground Zero for the first time, which remains one of my favorite albums of all time. If I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Whether it be and then sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No worries.
And then later on, I got really into Steve Reich, although I'm not quite as into Steve Reich as I used to be. And during college, I was very into free jazz. I was a huge Ornette Coleman fan, huge Albert Ayler fan. Started dabbling with free improv. Started like looking through records, going like doing deep dives into various labels that specialize in like free improv and electroacoustic improv. And eventually I found myself sort of in like a sort of in a like a hyperfixation on like post-Cagean, post-Feldmanian like aesthetics.
Was that the end of your thought, or did you cut out? I just want to make sure.
No, that was the end.
Okay, it was just such a strong period that I wanted to make sure we didn't just lose technical connection there. That's the downside of audio only.
I forgot to. When talking about my own projects, I forgot to mention that I also have a punk band now. It's called Musicians for Birds and Related Animals. So I'll just plug that also as far as group projects I have.
Do humans count as related to birds in this case? I
haven't thought about it in that much detail, but I would say yes.
Okay, I'm just wondering, like, if one of us listens to it and like we're not a bird, if it just won't be very enjoyable.
I think it's for you also. Yeah.
Okay, good. I like to feel included with our avian comrades. Anyways, let's talk about Nymphs, the supergroup. I think is maybe a tongue-in-cheek, but it's this rotating collaboration. Started this first release with the three of you, and it was spearheaded, like kind of formulated by Evelyn. I would just love to hear a little bit about kind of the origin of this idea as kind of a framework for ongoing work, for ongoing releases to raise funds for mutual aid and so on. But yeah, just thinking more about Nymphs as an entity before getting too specifically into Silently, the release that came out today/yesterday as of recording.
Evelyn, this feels like something where we should probably start with you.
The start of Nymphs, right?
Yeah, just, I mean, since it kind of spawned from your brain like Athena, where just kind of that the idea came from, how Yvonne and Astrid got involved, and kind of what your framework and your kind of conception of the project looks like, and then just kind of connect then to what this initial experience has kind of revealed itself to look like, and well, that'll get us to the music.
I first started thinking of, I mean, there's two kind of points that kind of came together for the idea. One of the ideas is that I've been trying to make just longer and longer songs. Originally when we were planning this, we were going to do it for 24 hours. And that was kind of a milestone I was aiming for, but at the same time, I was like really struggling to compose something of that length by myself.
You know, I think that's a fair struggle. If one wasn't struggling with a task like that, I would probably think that they're lying.
We also simply weren't able to get the recording space for an entire 24 hours in the end.
There's also the logistics, yes.
And then also at the same time, I think her name is, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, Yasrit Shadem. She's a noise musician. I forget where she's from, but
she's based in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, based in Pittsburgh. She made a 24-hour long song when I was thinking about making a 24-hour song. And she did that for Palestinian relief as well. And that kind of got my brain to kind of connect the dots to just like make a collaboration and then do it for Palestinian relief, because I don't have very much money at all, and I don't really have much of my own to give. So yeah.
Yeah, Astrid and Yvonne, how did y'all get involved with the project? Unless there's anything more you kind of had to add off the top.
You go first, Astrid.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it was at some point last fall, Evelyn was posting a lot of demos of like organ drones, guitar drones, electronic drones that she was coming up with. And I was really digging these demos. So I remember reaching out to her and saying, hey, if you ever have a group project you want me to get involved with, like I would love to be part of the creation of something that sounds like this. And Evelyn was like, hey, I have this idea for like this 24-hour drone album, and things kind of went from there.
Mm-hmm. And Astrid recruited me, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, I remember mentioning your name and vibe to Evelyn, and she was like, "Yeah, that seems like the kind of thing I would want to work with."
Yeah, and yeah, and in general, like I've been very very vocal about my stances on the occupation and genocide in Palestine, and I think that and I have really wanted to be involved in a project like this.
Cool. Looking a little bit just kind of into the nebulous future before talking about Silently. Alongside all of your other kind of personal work and whatever other music and bands and projects you're a part of, is there a plan to kind of keep this same group together for more Nymphs projects? I mean, and kind of contributing composition. since it's a pretty open framework for this ongoing thing, and presumably will involve more and then maybe fewer people down the line.
Yes, we're working on more than one thing, which is probably a bad idea, but we are. Yeah, I don't know how much of like what we're working on we should talk about yet, but
Yeah,
I feel
the
like
specifics aren't as important for this kind of question.
Keeping it kind of close to the chest just in case things change. And like we also have some ideas for people we might want to invite to collaborate with us, but like haven't talked to them yet, so can't publicize that. But like suffice to say, we have a few projects in mind for the next year or two.
Okay. Yeah, just we're more asking, if the seeds of future ideas for this trio or a evolved and expanded version of the group is already thinking ahead to the future. And so answer to that suffices as yes. We don't need to get into the specifics, if there even are any, which there probably aren't. So in full transparency, I have not listened to the full 12 hours. Not just like I technically would have had 12 hours since Evelyn, you sent me the files. So like if I like didn't sleep, I could have maybe fit it all in. And that leads me into my first question. Just since conceiving of that amount of time, not just as like a unit or like something you can refer to kind of nonchalantly, but as far as an actual like extended contained experience of recording, since I may not have sat down and listened to all 12 hours front to back, but you three recorded all 12 hours of it. So what, as you're in the midst of maybe like hour 2, hour 9, just any point of this just wave of these continuous waves of music, what's going through your mind? What are you drawn to? What are you thinking of? Are you beyond just like listening to each other? What's going through your head when you were in the middle of making this? Not thinking like listening back, but when you were just in the delirium kind of making it.
I can barely remember.
That, I can only imagine how blurry it would be.
It was a very disorienting process for sure.
It was a lot of like call and response kind of playing. Not really composed beyond just like one or two parts that were composed, I think. We had like timed out different movements, and like I wrote them all down on pieces of paper. So the time would come, and then we would transition from basically just swap out instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And it is really a blur. I'm sorry.
No, it would be kind of miraculous if you're able to like pinpoint exact moments of like clarity, unless they were really, really stuck with you. And that, kind of emphasizes the massive time that recording for 12 hours straight, especially making drones and noise, an even more nebulous form of music. Yeah, so you mentioned just setting almost like time spots for the movements and kind of the timed instrument swaps. How much of that was planned ahead of time? I know you said just a few or some of the base ideas for the music were composed and had been set in some way before the recording, but as far as just kind of like the movements and how the actual 12 hours begin to kind of take shape. before hitting the record button. What was that conversation like, if there was one at all?
I can speak to this a little bit. Yeah, so in the end, we had several sheets of paper with, like we mentioned, outlines on them. And it was composed in the sense that we had timestamps of of who would play which instruments when out of the instruments that we had available. Other than that, it was pretty much improvised, apart from a few like pre-recorded loops and drum machine samples that Evelyn was using during some of the movements. With those ones, we knew how it would sound beforehand, more or less. But most of the things that we were doing, we just knew what instruments we were playing and what kind of structure we were doing as far as when we would be louder and more dense or softer and more sparse. But other than that, just having it be a structured or partially pre-composed improvisation. Mm-hmm. And we composed these movements kind of through trial and error. We tried jamming together. We tried seeing what we liked and didn't like, and going from there. I mean, all of us made suggestions. Prior to Drone Not Drones, Chipu and Seer of Ask Serpent were also in on this project. They ended up having to drop for logistical reasons, but they also offered some suggestions to the movements that we composed back in December and January when we were working with them. And everything was kind of we let everything be kind of subject to Evelyn's approval in the end. Like, she served as sort of an artistic director. She committed everything to pen once we had decided what the outlines were going to be like. But we were all bouncing ideas off each other. It felt like a collaborative composition in each rehearsal to me.
Yeah, cool. With Drone Not Drones and that 5-piece formation of the project, beyond just kind of like the framework, or I guess the change in limitation between having 5 people to assume various roles versus 3, how much of the broader kind of music did you try to retain since at least movements 1 through 3 had been part of things you'd worked on for the Drone Not Drone set? What was the difference in approaching that same framework 2 separate times?
Well, a lot of the with less people, like, just some of the sounds had to be scaled back a bit. I personally, I just started playing more instruments at the same time. But generally throughout it, it became less of a crowded blur of sounds and more like a slightly less crowded blur of sound.
Yeah, I think just having heard portions of the recording and being vaguely familiar with y'all's music, going from 5 to 3 is a pretty big difference in far of just like the layers of texture in the noise and how crowded it can be, which is, a lot of the time that's the point. But it's a pretty remarkable difference just from a practical level, even if it may not seem like a huge difference to the outside observer. But it sounds like, Evelyn, you kind of picked up the slack, just like doubling up and going all over the place.
I would say it certainly felt like a big difference to me, though. I mean, movements 2 and 5 became very soloistic with just 3 people. Those are the more acoustically focused movements, acoustic instruments rather than electronic instruments. And then movements 3 and 4, even though those are kind of the more dense noise wall instruments, it felt like things were changing less frequently because there were just 3 of us. and simply because logistically there weren't as many people to be changing things at any given time.
And I if I can add to that, I feel like more than just going from a five musician setup to a 3 musician setup, we're also going from a 30-minute set to a 12-hour composition, which like not only does it make things like a lot less like layered, a lot less like chaotic, it also made it so that I feel like ideas had more like space to breathe, so to speak.
Absolutely. We could really commit to every single idea we had with this amount of a time scale. All of our rehearsals, like we had to scale down the movements immensely in order to have time to rehearse. We would like condense or summarize a planned 2-hour movement into 20 or 30 minutes. So I would say that like my experience of the 12-hour session was really exciting because it felt like I got to follow whims and impulses in a way that I almost never get to do. Because there's some amount of time constraint. It felt like I could play the same thing over and over for 20 minutes if I wanted to because of the lack of time constraint. And that was very exciting.
Yeah, you have a lot more time to work with on like an 800 bar solo than over an 8-bar solo. You can play a lot more with the repetition, with just letting tones hang. And that's kind of like the exciting prospect, and at least what I find appealing about a lot of like really long form work, that some of which is strangely popular online, like 8-hour records that aren't just like white noise, that seem to have a dedicated fan base that seems to be very in right now. So hopefully people are prepared with their long listening. Just thinking about that a little bit deeper, what is the intended way to experience this work as a listener, if there can be such a thing? Is it like, as far as you three, just if you even kind of preconceived this, would you want someone to take time and sit with all 12 hours and kind of relive that experience almost? Like, there's some kind of absurdity, but maybe beauty in doing that. But otherwise, how do you want people to engage with this body of sound of music, since it is so monumental? It's so there's just so much to absorb, I suppose.
I'm not really one to prescribe ways of listening, so to speak. So I feel like it could be experienced either in chunks or as like one whole thing. Obviously, like, since we recorded it, we experienced it as like one whole entity, and so I can't really speak to other ways of listening, I guess, but I'm not opposed to people listening to it in different ways.
Yeah.
If that's what you're asking.
Not framing it in like a restrictive prescribing kind of way where, here's the right way or the wrong way. But just, I'm curious just what your thoughts are. Like, it's like, in a perfect world, how would you want people to experience this? Like, all practicality aside, like, if we just had our magic pick of of infinite time to listen to any music that we wanted or any sound that we wanted, not trying to determine like if someone listens to it in 30-minute chunks or one movement at a time, like it's like a 6 LP box set kind of deal, like that they're wrong or anything like that. That's more kind of the framing of the question in my mind.
I mean, I feel, and like Evelyn and Astrid can talk more on this, but I feel as though the movements definitely compound on each other, and it was all recorded in one take. So and the different movements like segue into each other. So straight through would be I don't want to say that there's an intended way to listen, but straight through would be how I would say.
I agree that I think straight through would have the most powerful effect. What I've generally been saying when talking about this album is that, like, in order to get the full effect, you need to listen to at least a few hours in succession.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the things that happen in this album, I think, mean different things when they're coming after so long of something else happening. So much of the album feels like it's sort of waiting for something, maybe waiting for Palestinian liberation, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I wouldn't hold it against anybody to just listen to a snatch of it, though. Like the other day, I listened to half an hour of Movement 2 while taking a shower, and it was lovely. I still feel like I got a lot out of it, even though I hadn't listened to Movement 1 beforehand. But I mean, Movement 6 is like one of my favorite things I've ever been part of the creation of, and I don't think it stands alone, honestly. Like, I would not tell people to go and just listen to Movement 6. Like Yvonne says, it compounds. I think Movement 6 works much better coming after 3 hours of the weird sonic purgatory of Movement 5, which is mostly silence. And yeah, like with I would say that, you know, most of the album like has kind of bad vibes and feels kind of nightmarish. It's not easy listening ambient music. Not that, I mean, there's some, I'm not meaning to denigrate all ambient music that is easy to listen to. There's plenty of it that I like, but I don't think that's what we're going for here. With Movement 6, I think it was like shortly after recording it, I remembered this WhatsApp message that I had seen a screenshot of sometime in late October 2023. And I really wish I had screenshot this message at the time, because I wouldn't know what to look up to try to find it again. But it was someone messaging from Gaza, assuming that they were going to die soon because the bombs were falling everywhere. And they described having a vision that like the trails of light left by the missiles were the souls of martyrs ascending to paradise. And I cried when reading that WhatsApp message. And I was like, I want to create music that feels like how this WhatsApp message feels. And I feel like some parts of Movement 6 managed it. But it only really feels like that coming after 10 hours of other things.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree that it's a compounding listening experience. Having seen Astrid, your earlier message in the Discord about Movement 6 specifically, that is the one longer movement I spent a little bit of time with beyond Movement 1, since that's about like over half the length. It's going to be less than half the length of the rest of the movements, just to get an idea of kind of parts of the sonic palette. These long form works are meant to be listened to in that extensive, like in their full extent. Like you don't listen to only 20 minutes of an Eliane Radigue composition that's 80 minutes long. If you can afford it, if you can find the time, but it's the length of the work is a very important part of it, both in like the artistic and political spirit inspiring it, but also in the kind of in the ideal world of a listening experience in which someone could be afforded 12 hours to just listen to one piece of music instead of being torn in every which direction by the rest of the things we have to do in a day. I'd at least be happier if I got to listen to just like 12 hours of noise music. In theory, not necessarily the kind of harrowing stuff that the first several movements dive into, but to have that amount of time to go through the harrowing moments and come out to that slightly more almost hopeful, not to be too cliche about it, but hopefully it ends in some kind of, you know, emotional ascendance in movement 6, which is obviously the final movement. Yeah, I don't really know where I was going with that, or if y'all had any more thoughts kind of on the length and kind of like the density of the piece.
Yeah, I mean, when I was kind of like putting together when we were putting together like the vague, like before we had like actually like composed any of it, the idea was and how it turned out was that basically like the first 10 hours of it are like blistering and like harrowing, and pretty much like only like tease at like a nice sound, and then at the very end, when you've kind of forgotten then that kind of music can exist, just do the same 2 notes for 2 hours and hit bells. Yeah. So I feel like especially movement 6 really relies on everything else that came before it to work. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, the silence of the immediately prior, of the immediately preceding movement is a huge part of that, as well as the punishment and the noise and violence of the first 4 movements.
I don't think the first 4 are just punishment, though. I mean, I'd be curious to hear how you're thinking about them, Evelyn. But certainly, with movement 4 especially, I take an extended melodica solo for the first half of movement 4, and it's against this wall of several different types of static. There's radio static, there's, I think, egos on a guitar, and there's that amplified box fan that I use sometimes. And what I was trying to do there was like find some sort of tonality in the static and like some sort of comfort in something that like would be auditorily conceptualized as atonal on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's several moments like that during the noisier movements too, that it's about somehow like coping or finding some harmony in chaos. I don't know if you're thinking of that at all, Evelyn.
Yeah, that's what I meant when I was talking about like kind of teasing at the nicer sounds,
Yeah,
and more comforting tones than screeching noise.
Yeah, there's like just like a lone melody swimming in a sea of everything else. It's probably a darker sea, because that's how it feels. A lot of the time, and I think this captures a snippet of that, or a moment or segment of that. Do you think, off the top of your heads, that you could each list off every instrument, tool, or sound generating device, beyond just silence itself, since that is included, that you used in the recording of this work?
I'm calling up the personnel list because I will otherwise.
No, that's cheating. Come on. No, that's super
Off
fair.
the top of our head, we have to do it. Okay, I'll go first.
I didn't look at it.
I'll go first. So I played the trumpet, the whirly tube, or I guess it's called the Blugel resonator, apparently. Yeah. let's see. I threw some objects. I had vocal parts, radio, of course. I think I used a plastic bag at some point.
Yeah, that sounds right.
There isn't going to be a test on this. We're not going to check this against the listed credits on Bandcamp, so don't worry. I just thought it'd be an interesting challenge since it is so extensive, even just for each of you.
Flexitone. I forgot about the Flexitone.
You banged on a spring reverb.
Oh yes, the spring reverb. That was a great part. I love the spring reverb. Thanks Evelyn for the spring reverb. I also messed with Evelyn's drum machine a bit. That's what I can remember.
We both spoke. Yvonne and I both had spoken word parts. Hers were quotes from various poems and interviews and such, and mine were poems that I wrote. I played bowed psaltery, which is a type of bowed zither, or I guess just psaltery, not just bowed, because I also did other things to it besides bowing it. I played a box fan amplified by means of a stethoscope and run through effects units. I vocalized. I played melodica. I played penny whistle. And I played glockenspiel. Thanks, Evelyn, for the glockenspiel. There may be one or two more things I'm forgetting.
I played guitar through effects.
Multiple guitars, yeah, right? One of them tuned really weird.
They're both tuned really weird. I don't even remember what the other one was tuned. One of them was tuned to just all F sharp. And then I forgot what I tuned the Tesco to. I'm sorry. I played a recorder, which was really fun. I love playing the recorder. There was my drum machine, my little battery synth. It's like a tiny little synth that it runs off a battery. I had a telephone microphone that I also ran through all my pedals.
If anyone wants the full list, they can just go.
I know I used more, but I don't remember.
Keyboard.
You have the organ.
Yeah,
The keyboard. Oh yeah, I forgot I used the big keyboard.
With magic cards, right?
Yeah, stick magic cards in the keys and hold them down.
Oh my god, I've never heard of anyone using Magic the Gathering cards to prepare a piano. That's kind of fantastic. Oh my god. All right. Well, it's been about an hour, so I appreciate y'all taking time to talk about the record. We're talking on the 2nd of May, which is Bandcamp Friday. Hopefully, people have already seen the record, or at least have seen have come across it and are able to support y'all support the family in Gaza directly through y'all. But it's still going to be an ongoing thing. So what is the best way for people to find the work so they can buy it, maybe even set aside some time to listen to some of it? Maybe it doesn't have to be the full 12 hours if they're so unlucky as to not have 12 hours to spend. But just tell us where people can find that, or even just stay tuned for future releases from the project. We kind of got the head of the show where everyone can find your solo work. So there's more just about where to find Nymphs. Not just actual Nymphs, the project Nymphs.
Yes, well, I would say look up Silently by Nymphs on Bandcamp. The cover should be a black and white image of some flowers. I believe they're flowers that are native to Palestine. I think Evelyn mentioned that. And yeah, if you're on Instagram, follow Evelyn on Instagram. I think she'll have the most frequent updates.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of critters.
Yes, and you can also support her critter fixation.
I think that's another noble edge to the work. Is the critter support.
Sure.
Cool. Well, we kind of got the plug in there at the end. Unless there was anything else the three of you wanted to add about Silently, about the project, anything that we haven't covered today that you wanted to add on before we end up here.
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine.
You have been listening to the Ear Coffee Podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share so we can stand out against the sea of other music podcasts. You can find information and other important links in the show notes of this episode. If you would like to support us, please consider subscribing on Patreon for early access to live sessions and other bonus content. You can also subscribe to our Substack for a regular newsletter with reviews, ramblings, and anything else we have to say. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.